everybody, anybody, somebody. Let me get my screen going here. There, that was supposed to be a little smoother than that. Welcome to a live stream ramble. A totally unplanned and unmanned, some would say, maybe even unhinged live stream. Today we're going to be covering some new news and some old way of using, or new way of using old tools. Let's start before we get into object, which is where we're going to land. Let me call up something here. Oh, I have got this set up wrong. Look at that. Hang on a second. I'm not broadcasting my screen. So what I'm going to show first, while I try to figure this out, is a way of exploring some different sonic options whenever you're lost for a sound and you just need some new options. It can make some amazing kick drums. Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to talk and do things at the same time. Never a good idea. I've got to... what I'm doing is I'm sharing the screen and I don't know how to unshare it. I'm splitting the screen rather. Where is the way? Oh, main display. Will this do it? Yes, that did it. Oh no, that did something even worse. That made me the not main display. Okay, use as main display. Use as mirror. That's the one. Did I get it? Yes. Okay. Boy, that's so confusing. I've got another screen over here and one there, and going back and forth is confusing to this feeble-minded old man. So what I'm going to show you first, let me just play a little bit of this. What I want you to, well, I won't say what it is. There is a sound that's changing on the drums, and that's more traditional. So what I want to do is going to change? Yeah. So what we're doing here is I'm going to be showing you some different techniques for sound sculpting that might not have occurred to you. This won't be a very long part of the show here. What I've got set up, oh, let's do this other thing too. Let's get rid of that. Let's bring this up. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to use this handy tool which we've seen before. Let's take the phase off, to show a curve of something while we're manipulating it. So I have two sweepers here under one set of controls. The idea is, well, you see, they'll both move. One of these sweepers has audio going through it, for those who care. The other has the curve analyzer running through it, so I can display. And so that the curve will match what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing. I have to have two of them like that because this plugin actually works by sending audio through the device you're analyzing, and therefore you can't really listen to audio going through it at the same time because it's got this pulse sweep signal. So stepping back here, looking for my water and I didn't get it. I might have to go run in the house and grab it before this is over. The okay, so you recognize that. That's a phaser. But I'm not sweeping it. and I've played around with it. And this is with most stages and the narrowest bandwidth. That sounds good too. So that just gives you some options, some tonal options when you start playing around with that. That sounds a little weird there. Now, normally narrow notches like that aren't going to do a whole lot. Depends on how dense the sound is. But in a mix, you just put any phase shifter on it and turn off the LFO to frequency sweep mode and then start playing with it. Now, here's the thing. Let's cover this really quick. This was very helpful for me to understand the phaser and sweeper. So if we set this to one stage, we'll see we get one notch with these settings. And if we increase the bandwidth, it gets wider, but it also kind of gets deeper too. This is when it really can sound hollow. That's not probably the most useful sound, but sometimes you can find a place where it works. Now what feedback does is it's going to add positive peaks like this, and that can be really handy, which I'll show you on the kick drum here in a minute. Again, the idea is not to sweep, but just to find a static. Now you can use an EQ, you can sit and sweep and look for frequencies. This is kind of what you do when you're lost and when you've tried all the usual tricks and you're not quite able to find anything. This is a kind of a semi-random way to do that. Now we've got this one set up for the drums. Let's see, I need to turn on this viewer here. And we're doing, I don't know why, I think this is just how I saved the file, doing the sweep. Let's start by soloing. I want to hear just the kick, because you can get some very different sounds. Okay, so you can see left and right is separating with spread, but let's get that back centered again. None of those are particularly useful. I start usually with no feedback. Let's do let's do one stage. Oh, and don't forget to try the polarity button too, which in this case turns it into a bandpass filter. Not very useful, but when we add more stages, it can be more useful. But going back to one, oh, that's two. That's a very interesting bandpass with a notch in the middle of it. That's a very interesting shape. Don't know if it's useful, but it's interesting. Now, that's a good sound right there. By pushing the feedback up, we can boost some resonances. There we go. Somewhere around here you can get the classic kind of like the Pultec effect, which would be a notch around 200. In this case it looks like it's at 217. Do you see the little display here? So this is another thing that's so handy about this plugin. And then by adjusting the feedback, we can push a little bit of a bump on top or not. Now, I don't remember. That's not quite as interesting as I was hoping for. There we go. This is the one. One stage, is it? I have to look. Yeah, one stage with feedback gives us the classic where we've got the notch around 200, taking out mud, and then use bandwidth to kind of fine-tune the effect. And that's kicking right there. And then if you don't want so much of it, that's the original, by the way. This is just the hip hop kit from the Reason sound banks. I think this is the default redrum. Anyway, yeah, it's louder too, but it's got a little bit more resonance on the bottom and a little bit more attack, and the mud's gone out of the middle. Fun little thing to explore. And then you can just, when the feedback's up, you're going to get a pitch. So when you start adding more stages, you never know what's going to work. This is probably not going to work, but spacing them out sometimes works better. And this is why usually 3 stages rather is more than you need. Anyway, I've put this on kicks that were not sounding very powerful, and it brought them to life. And I didn't understand, because I didn't have a visual. I wasn't sure what it was doing. I knew it was doing notches and peaks, but I wasn't sure how to adjust the settings to get what I wanted. So basically, without feedback, you don't have any boosts on the positive side. With feedback, you get a boost on the positive side, which usually makes it more pitched. Bandwidth is not only going to control the size of each notch, but also the spacing between them, which in conjunction with frequency will allow you to tune them. You can get a lot of mileage out of just one stage. Obviously, with a notch, it's a handy thing. And this is a very handy thing if you have a very high resonance on a patch that's at one specific frequency. You can usually dial it out pretty well and then use the dry-wet amount to figure out how much of it you want to remove. And don't forget to adjust volume accordingly, because it's going through the device, so the volume will be a factor. And you could try polarity. Oh, let's look at the phase response. So basically what we're doing is we're creating an all-pass filter, and then we're adding it back to itself to create the interference, which creates the notch. As you can see, the phase response shows it's not really accurate here to the, it should be going up all the way to 180 on each side, showing that it's 180 degrees out in the middle, which is why it cancels. And then the phase relationship to other frequencies diminishes so that we don't get the effect on either side, but just in the middle. It's a little confusing. Phase is a circular concept, so it has to wrap back around on a display to actually show us what's going on here. But technically speaking, I think it's going infinitely up or down in phase as it moves it around. And obviously 180 is half of 360, which would be a complete rotation back into phase again, but with a delay. And remember that the delay happens only at a frequency specified by the filter. When you have multiple filters, you have multiple frequencies, but with just one filter or stage, you have one frequency. And we can mute the dry, can we? Or do I have to? I'll have to do it on the one I'm actually looking at. We can mute the dry, and now you see the phase is still being shifted, but we don't hear it because we are not able to, we're not combining it back with the original, so we don't have the interference. The phase shift alone is, some claim to hear it, a very few claim to hear it. Most admit that phase and absolute polarity is very difficult, if not impossible, to hear. And I'm not sure there's a good reason why you need to be able to hear it, because you can usually fix it very easily without hearing it, just by well, when there's an interference, obviously. That's why when you're doing a drum kit, one mic can have an inverted polarity to the other, and on their own they won't sound any different, but you put them together and how they interact is what's going to be affected by the polarity, which is similar to phase, but it's canceling some frequencies or all frequencies in some cases if you had a perfect polarity inversion. But the degree of level difference and distance from the different instruments is your interaction And so sometimes you'll hear a big difference when you flip the polarity of one of the two signals. Doesn't matter which one either. Other times you won't. So seeing that this is one of those interesting cases where it's doing something but you can't hear it until you blend it with something else. Also visible like this. Now I'm not sure why this display changes when I mute the dry versus there. I'm not sure. It's still a 180-degree phase shift because that's how it's canceling. At that point, there's a perfect null. Let's move on to object because this is a deep subject. I just wanted to encourage people to get Sweeper out and play with it with these low stage settings and put it on harmonically rich sounds, specifically like sounds with a lot of harmonic interest going on, and you can find EQ settings that are very interesting that you wouldn't be able to, well, you would be able to get another way, but you probably wouldn't land on those settings because it's such an odd way to approach EQing something. Explore and let me know if anybody finds anything really cool. By the way, the opening song was, hang on, Goodbye Mr. S for Ryuichi Sakamoto tribute, and it's all object except for the mini brute bass, and only because I already had that patch up and running and I just happened to hit it. I think we would have been able to do the same thing with object. Even though that's a pure analog synth, I think we'd still be able to get it. One of the things that's really been exciting about this instrument is something that if you're not playing it, if you're sequencing it or using a player to generate notes, you might not really notice it. But I think the reaction that a lot of people have had to this synth comes from putting your hands on the keyboard and playing it and feeling how it responds, how it feels more like an instrument. There's an extra reverb on there, by the way, coming from ROM. And a little tape mellow-fi from Arturia as well. Where's ROM? It's a big, long reverb. And it's probably, there it is. It's probably my go-to, I need a big reverb. Huge, long area. You can freeze it at any moment too, which is lovely. But as you play, it's one of those things, you have to play this instrument to understand if it's going to be inspiring to you or not, because that's what I think most of the people in the teaser videos were reacting to, not necessarily just the raw sound and what it could do, which is also impressive. But the feeling I get from when I'm playing it is that it's somewhere in a magical space between samples and synthesis. It is synthesis, but since it's more complex, it feels more like samples in some way because it's got all that interest in organic quality in the movement, but it's clearly not samples. And then when you start messing with parameters, you can get some really interesting sounds. And I probably should bypass my mastering so I don't have such a delay. Much better and not as loud. I think the way that I've been approaching this, which I've been part of the beta testing team, and by the way, I've failed to make any useful sounds on my own, but I can take a factory patch and modify it either intentionally or with the randomize button, which is an amazing feature. Here, I guess I could put it on the screen while I'm talking about it. The part that I think you need to understand for sure is the exciter section, because it can change the sound. And what I mean when I'm talking about understanding it is, if you're not going to be able to program patches from scratch, which likely will be the case for most of us because this is a deep instrument and it's not always predictable how it reacts, and that's something to love about it. But when you're scrolling through patches and you find something and you just wish I could just have a little bit more something or something, whatever that something is, you need to be able to find that. And so that's what I focused on. I'll give you an example. Here's a factory patch that I really liked. This uses the noise rather than the impact, which is where this gets really interesting to me as a synthesizer. But I don't want those harmonics that are there. So I can see this only uses the modal section, not object 1 or not object 2. And if I, that's that high whistle. And this is the octave in the 5th, the 3rd harmonic. So now we have octaves. And let's use this one. Actually, I think if I command click, I can reset that. 3, 4. And I haven't saved that yet, but almost every time I call this patch up, I play it for a few seconds, then I think, nah, I really don't like those extra harmonics in there. There are 3 other versions of this deep into the folders of the factory sound banks that are provided with it, but they all have this odd harmonic, which is a great one-finger texture, but if you want to play it more like a noisy voice patch, then I would just make those changes and probably make it a bigger reverb and longer decay time. Now there's one quirk of the, it's got a few quirks because it's not doing things the normal way. One of the quirks is that when you trigger the same voice over again, it'll restart the effect. But if I played one and then a different chord, they will overlap. Increasing the polyphony won't change that because it's the way that it's dealing with that voice architecture. In Oberheim speak, I would want it to be on rotate. So, and I can't remember what reason calls this mode. It might not have been possible. I know that, what was it, glide? No, what was it? Something, glide was a weird thing because you've got the exciter going and you're gliding the resonators, but you're not gliding the exciters. So I think, I'm trying to remember how they were describing that when we were testing it, the things we were looking for. So I imagine that's similar to why this is cutting off a note when you play the same note repeatedly. That's about the only thing about this instrument that I don't get. Everything else is really, really fun. Let me just go through a few things. Let me show you one of the coolest weird features, and it's called a source in the modulation matrix called black key. What that allows them to do is to make the white keys and the black keys play different sounds. So any of the white keys. Then the black keys are. That's something I think I know more than one person mentioned that they wish that all the reason instruments had the black key. Similar to key and octave, kind of, in its quirkiness and its usefulness, but it's one of those things that when you need it, I don't know how I would do it otherwise. It would be very complicated. You would have to try to filter out, create two instruments and filter out the white notes from one and the black notes from another using a scales and chords maybe. This makes it a lot easier, and I don't know, other than this one patch, which patches utilize this, but it's really kind of a cool little, wow, I didn't know I needed that, but every once in a while I might. Great for percussion sounds, because a lot of them have a similar type of thing, like a taiko drum on the bottom and the stick clicks, which is similar to that on the black keys. So it's a useful thing, and it's built in. You don't have to build it. Here's a lot of the sounds are kind of in this category of sounds, I would say. That is kind of a piano, but it's not really a piano. But you can play it like a piano. It plays like a piano. It's kind of got a darker sound, and it's got a weird sound, and when you hit it hard up high, it's almost got a sitar quality to it. Sometimes it sounds like it's out of tune with itself, like the 2 strings on a piano or the 3 strings on a piano. Let me, I just realized I'm doing my classic distraction thing where I get lost in what I'm doing and forget to check the chat. Hello, everybody that's joined me. What's the benefit of doing this over using a normal EQ or the mixer EQ? I feel like it's one of those things where you know you need to do something to it, but you don't know what situations. So I wouldn't do that all the time, but it's come up multiple times for me that when I was stuck and not sure what to do with the sound, I started messing with that. And on a few times I opted not to go with the effect, but I did a similar thing with the EQ. So it kind of just, it's kind of a brain flush when you're stuck on a sound and you're EQing the same way that you normally do, and you fall into patterns and habits, and you know that your usual tricks don't apply on this case, but you're unable to kind of get out of the pattern and see it from a different angle. It's kind of like stepping way away from a painting if you're painting, or flipping it upside down to try to see it from another perspective, to see what, when you know it's still not finished but you're not sure what it needs. That's kind of just a loosens things up technique. You know, sticking on the kick drum especially. Oh my gosh, that was the first time it happened to me was on the kick drum, and it's, like I said, not doing anything that you couldn't do with an EQ, but it's got that steep notch that's in there, and it's just a way to create happy accidents, if you will. And I'm always looking for that. I get stuck some days, and this is, if you're just doing it for fun, that's great. But if you have a deadline, you have to find ways to get yourself unstuck. And that's one of them. It just gives me a way. Sometimes it's a palate cleanser. It just, you hear so many different things that you kind of just like, okay, now I've kind of reset my ears. And so that's all that is. There's not an advantage to a regular EQ. If you've got the EQ curve in mind and you apply it and it fixes or addresses whatever you're trying to deal with, then use the EQ. But I would also check it out during downtime when you're just messing around and you don't really have a song idea or anything that you're interested in working on, just put a kick drum through it and start messing with it and see what it does. It could be, you know, every trick, every technique's not for everybody at all times. I fully expect, as it was with me, half the stuff that people showed me, I never, even the pros that I was training under, I never used myself. But the other half, I use all the time still. So you never know what's going to click, and you never know what the other person is actually looking for, or if it's going to apply or not. So like clothes shopping, you sometimes have to try things on. You can't just hold them up against you. You have to actually put them on and see how they feel. And that would be put that phaser on the drums and turn the sweep off and see if it does anything for you. So let's go back to object. One of the things, obviously, turning off the these guys and hearing just the exciter can sometimes help you understand what's going on, maybe not in this case, and hearing the individual. So that's kind of a resonant. That's the main sound. Oh, that's interesting. Almost sounds like somebody walking upstairs. A lot of these are pretty cool. So let's first talk about going through a patch and where are the things that affect the sound. So in this case, the main pitched element is object 1. So we determined that. If we wanted to make it decay less, we could adjust the decay. So this is an important area of the interface for whichever object is. And let's see, a lot of these others are trickier. Dispersion is kind of, it's going to be unintentional, totally unintentional, but messing with dispersion is like putting a phase shifter or all pass filters on a sound and turning it till it sounds right. It does a very similar thing. Can't always tell what it's doing, and also get used to this. So maybe I like it there, so I have to analyze and fix. Now I'm back in tune. So whenever you adjust things, and these are weirdly interactive too. Oh, maybe I'm thinking the modal mode. Oh no, I'm sorry, it has to be with coupling. No. Oh. There we go. That's what, when coupling is on, moving one of these doesn't just add that to the mix in parallel, they're in series essentially. So one's feeding the other. So when you mess up there, you go back, analyze. Oh, I've really messed it up. Which leads me to the next section, which is the amazing randomize. I was using it for a while before I fully understood what it could actually do. I thought you clicked on the randomize button and it randomized, and then you clicked it again and it randomized again. If you wanted a different amount, you would change it. But what's interesting, and I've really messed that sound up, so maybe it's not the best. Let's see if I can get back to, oh, here, let's just load the patch up again. Let's load. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to randomize. My lips aren't working today. Object 1. So with it all the way down at 0, it's not doing anything. That's kind of interesting. Do I need to fix it? Then, can I get back out? Yep, randomize. If I clicked OK, it would write that patch. But pulling the slider around and finding the sweet spot is pretty, I'm trying to say, I want to say it's unique, but I don't know that for sure. I know there's a lot of synths out there with randomize functions on them. So I would imagine many of them can do something similar to this, where we have the amount that we can play with. Interesting. It would be very easy to get lost in that. I don't know how I would use a sound like this, but it really is interesting. I think that could be useful on a breakdown or a section where you needed something dissonant and weird. And this can do that sort of thing. Like, I don't know if anybody remembers absinthe from Native Instruments, originally from, oh gosh, I can almost remember the guy's name. It was the first time I remember a little developer getting bought up and hitting the big time. And so it could do similar to these scraping metallic sounds. And then Mod Wheel was doing a similar thing, making it even harsher or scratchier. Now, I remember an interview with Peter Gabriel and Daniel Lanois, who obviously worked on Peter Gabriel albums, but they also did a soundtrack for a movie called Birdie. And in the interview, they were marveling at, because this was the first time, well, Eno had done this before, but Peter Gabriel had always worked with dense productions, and the idea of having 1 or 2 or maybe 3 parts total playing in a soundtrack was novel to him, and he was marveling at how complex you could make those sounds because they didn't have to fit with other sounds. They were going to be on their own. So that always stuck with me, that's the general concept. The more tracks you have, the more you have to squeeze them into each of their own compartments. But if you only have 1 or 2 sounds playing, you can have these crazier, richer textures than you might be able to support in a dense mix. So sounds that are crazier, on the crazier end of the scale with Object, I would say are great for intros or outros or breakdowns. But there's a few, and they didn't really put all of them on the top level here. There's the bass I love, but there's also sounds like this. Somewhere between a sax and a clarinet. They call it a sax. Sometimes when it's more of the mellow soundings, that's almost more like a tin whistle or penny whistle, flute. The electric piano, the 70s one that Ryan was using in his videos, I think is even better. Let's dive deeper. Let me show you some of my favorites. The glockenspiel, which is one of my favorite all-time instruments. I think that sounds more like a glockenspiel than the orchestral samples, or at least as much because that one also sounds like a glockenspiel. But that's just sweet, beautiful. It's not harsh. It's bright without being brittle. And it's got a nice attack, but it's also got a nice sustain, and you don't lose the pitch in the metallic attack. Anyway, there's a lot of sounds that are in that category in my mind that feel like they are as good as the instruments that they are mimicking. Where was the 70s stage piano? That's the one I think I liked. Yeah. It's more of a Wurlitzer kind of, but also very sweet. Checking the notes, Calliope. I also like Calliope. Let's see how this one goes. Yep. You never know when you're going to need a Calliope. Let me go to that bass sound. I didn't explore the bass. The acoustic was just so... It's got a good bark and growl. I don't know what mod wheel does. Nice. That, again, I'm just going through the presets now, but when you're playing it, it's an okay sound. It's not, any different than a good upright bass, but when you're playing it, you feel more like, I've heard other people say, like you're playing an instrument and not a synth patch. And I don't know what that means either, except for it feels more physical, like there's a connection where there really isn't, but it feels more like there's a connection. I'm trying to remember. Let's just go through a few of these, because some of these, oh, this was nice. That's a nasty bass there. Let's see, just a few. Nope, not much there. That's really nice. Again, it's the feeling of playing it and feeling like, I don't know, now I'm just feeling like I'm a fanboy gushing, but it really is a very emotionally evocative instrument. Like a real piano is, or a Fender Rhodes or a Wurlitzer, or even a B3. And I'm a huge synthesizer fan, obviously. So I'm not saying synthesizers aren't that way. They play a different role for me. This is, I think, most interesting because it has still some of the cool things I like about synthesizers, while also having some of the cool things I like about samples and acoustic instruments. It seems to be able to fit into that space between, the liminal space between sampled and synthesized, that it's kind of neither, and maybe that's why people are kind of reacting positively, maybe even over the top about it, because it's not just a modeling synth, and it's certainly not a analog synth. It's not a sampler. And I think that it's barely being explored at this point, because I think there's a lot of depth there. That's not a critique. It's a deep instrument, and I think it's going to take a while to find all of its secrets. I know Thor was revealing secrets, and Europa has revealed secrets over the years where somebody finds some other cool technique to do with it that you wouldn't have thought of. I imagine the same thing's going to happen with this instrument because it has that feeling of depth, like we're just scratching the surface. Some of the most fun sounds are the drum sounds, which I was not expecting at all. There are a lot of acoustic sounding drums, but a couple of that sound like they could be more in an electronic environment. Where are they? Like these. This sounds like an analog 909. That's a nice one too. Darker version. I like how a lot of the sounds, you can hear it there compared to this one. This sounds like it's a direct out from a synth drum machine or a close mic, and this sounds like it's in a room. And I'm not sure where that's coming from, the room sound, but it's probably just the noise effect in there. So I think it's really easy to get in there and start to mess with some. In fact, let me skip ahead. Do I have it open? To some other explorations I've done. Here, for example, I'm playing around with the inputs, and I came up with this process here. So you put, oh, where did it go? Oh, maybe this is in another song. Here's the external end. Might have been in one of my other explorations. So what I started doing is putting a line mixer in front of the, well, we can hear this anyway, in front of the external input, so I could blend in different things to the input. This is the object with, I think it's these drums feeding it now. Yep. And in this case, let me hear. Yeah, there is still the original impact. Now, when you're putting an external input into object, it's becoming a third exciter. So if I leave this knob up here and play the sound, it'll still play. And then if I run the sequencer, it's got to be this one, sorry. It'll also play. And I'm just using my favorite trick with beat map and 2 pulsar LFOs, usually at odd relations 5, 4, and 7, 4 to the matrix here to get weird sounds, and you can see all the lights are lighting up. And we can listen to this because I'm patching out of the parallel outputs. Try a different map. Not necessarily interesting on its own. Now, I thought I was messing around so much. Here we go. Here's the version. This probably doesn't have anything recorded, but this is the example of using a line mixer. Now I've got both exciter levels off, and this is in a combinator, so these sounds are all playing together. But the sounds also come out on their own, so I could listen to that. I've got that just doing a random thing. Let's hear what that sounds like. Oh no, I might even be confused which sound. That's this. This is from grain. So this is this patch from grain as the resonator. Just another patch from a synthesizer as the external input. Sounds with a lot of panning are really nice too, as you can hear. Maybe I need to be hitting play. And then you combine that with, say, putting a dual arpeggiator. And let's see, in my limited time here, what I was doing here. Oh, I was trying to do a whole track. I wasn't really happy with the way it's going, but you can hear it. In some ways, these drum sounds, they may not be the end of the world, killer drum sounds that everyone's been looking for forever, but they're very versatile, and what you can do to modify them is amazing. This is what I expected Kong's drums, their synthesized and modeled drums, to be more like, but I think that this even beats them to some degree at least. The bass drums, oh, where were those? Oh my gosh. I had so many things all set up here. What is this one? Oh, did I leave? Okay, so that's a problem. If you ever have that happen, it's probably because I left somebody playing right there, and I can't get control over to my current other song. So when you have multiple songs loaded and you leave one playing, it won't let you switch, there we go, to the next sound, to the current one that's on the screen. There were some good almost orchestral drums. I was not quite as happy with the cymbals. Oh no, that's not what I meant to do. Here we go. I meant to come out of that. Percussion maybe. Metal, skins, wood. Let's see. Bongo. Oh, I haven't even gone into this folder. Oh my gosh. Okay, sub-bass drum. This is what I'm looking for. Some low stuff. I know oh, maybe it was the taikos. I know I've heard some. Those are nice. Wish they had a little bit more of a pitch change, so you had low drums down here. Oh, and they're doing the black key trick. Yes. That's what I was talking about. The sticks on the black keys, although it's not quite believable. These sounds, the low sounds, are very much working for me. I remember somebody said timpani. Oh yes. All right. These are very playable. A little bit of dynamics should probably be added. What is the modulation effect? Let's find out. That is an awesome sound. That didn't work. Octaves. Sounds like War of the Worlds. Almost. Anyway, lots to explore. I'm going to wrap it up now. And I don't think... Oh, there's a surdo. I don't think I've missed anything. There's a lot to explore. Use the randomize feature. But also figure out where are the key things that you need to know about. The tuning one, although it doesn't work on drums. The decay, and if you're in the modal, it's time here is scaling all of these decay scales. These are just decay rates, but you can scale each of these harmonics separately. Although I see most patches are pretty much similar, and then this will affect the whole. Well, it depends on what that, oh, that mode's off. Well, it's not going to do anything if it's off. Anyway, spend some time with the exciters too, because all of these different modes, especially with the noise, this is a very useful one. Yeah. Very nice, rich sound. Static, like a vinyl sound, or turns to noise. Oh, don't forget you have the envelope on this. I keep forgetting about that. And a delay. Probably is better with a little of attack. That's great for when this sound is... Let's turn on something that'll help. And remember, on the exciter sections, their level control is like a preamp drive into the exciter. So it's not just how much of the level, but it'll affect the tone too. That's how velocity can affect the tone. So play with all of these things, get familiar with it, at least the exciter section in terms of if you want to master this, start with that, because that's the foundation of sounds is going to come from there, and then just tackle each one of these one at a time. And what I've found is very handy is just especially in this synth, but this the old classic, go through the sounds you like and figure out what it is that's making you like those sounds. And don't be afraid of messing it up. You can't break it. All right, until next time, thanks everyone for joining me, and I'm always over on Reason Talk. I don't know everything about this synth, even though I've had it here since January, according to one of my song files that I was digging through. I think it's going to be one of those friends that you didn't really like at first or weren't sure about at first, and then they end up being a good friend over time. And also remember, you don't have to understand it to use the presets, and just get inspired from that angle and then hit the randomize and go to town. And save early and save often. And hope everybody is able to make some exciting new music with this, or at least some exciting music, or at least some new music. Until next time, this is Giles Reeves signing off. if I can find the right button.